she wants me to
Hi, JP.
push it. She gonna push it?
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. And welcome to the first Educational Programs and Services Committee of the 24-25 school year. My name is Emily McCormick. I'm the chair of this committee. And here to my right is JP Prego. Trina Sharpschmidt is unable to be here this evening. We've also got ex officio Melanie Cunningham, as well as Peg Pennypacker in the audience tonight watching. And we've got our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, our director of special education. What else do we have down there? We've got an assistant principal. We've got our curriculum supervisor. I saw Jim walk around here somewhere.
It's a table of celebrities.
It is really a great night to be in the school district building.
Yep.
Admire it, Peg.
When I go
So-
out, it's like that.
Let's kick this off with the approval of the May 21st Educational Programs and Services minutes, which are here in the attachment.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Third.
Are there any questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All righty. Next up. Hello.
Wow. So, long time no see. We
Uh-huh.
were in May, we met to present for,
Oh, you lost your device now.
are you serious?
They knew you were about to start.
Come on, buddy.
What did you do? JFX.
I hope you had a nice summer.
Stop sharing. I guess it's asking me what my mood is.
I'm just
Good,
vamping
bad, or-
already.
How's my mood?
JFX
Yep.
G4. Yeah.
Hmm?
Here's me trying to have it like projected early. It just asked me what my mood is. It said like, how are you feeling today? I'm like, well, I was feeling fine until you stopped my sharing. Okay.
Okay.
Great, so appreciate the time tonight. So we have a short, we have, obviously we're gonna come out of our TSI for 2023, 2024. And I wanna thank the team, a lot of the members of the team that are at this table sat, we spent some time last week just tweaking our goals and finalizing our plan for this year. So I wanna thank the team for being a part of that. Dr. Farina and Sarah and Carol, everybody was there to kind of talk through it. The assistant principals. So thank you for the work that we went into kind of crafting this, and the teachers who were able to we were able to meet with in May, and our student panel from April, kind of talking about some target areas that we can consider. We'll go over some of that feedback tonight from the teacher panel, because that was the meeting that we hadn't had as of EPS in May. So I do have some quick input from them. But generally speaking, tonight we wanted to do an update for the 2023-2024, the end of the year data, because that was the last quarter that we didn't get a chance to share with school year ending. Talk about the two goals that we had for our TSI plan for last year and the progress related to those goals, because through FRCCP, is it FRCCP or is it FRRCP? I always say it wrong.
You're right.
So it's FRCCP. We have to do quarterly monitoring for TSI for those goals. So I want to share kind of the end of the year data and where we got to on those goals. Happy to share we satisfied both goals. We met both goals that we laid out for last year. So I'll share some data on that, and then I'll go over the teacher input from when Jen and I got a chance to meet with the teachers in the spring. Todd, were you at that meeting too? I think the three of us were there. It was either me and Jen, or you. I think you were there too.
When I was a student one, I can't recall.
So we have some input from them related to TSI, and then we have 5 goals outlined. We went from 2 goals. We actually have 5 goals for 2024, 2025. So a little bit more that we're looking to try to monitor. We'd like to go over those goals for our plan. So end of the year data. This is the big slide that we have. Obviously, we went through benchmark data at the May meeting, but the column we're focused on is this column here, and then this column here. So
I don't see what you pointed
Yes,
to.
where's there?
oh my gosh, so quarter 4. Right here, we're looking at the last 2 columns.
Now we're talking about it.
So if you look at, for 9th grade, it was the percent passing all courses, but the connection to this was our TSI goal was related to what percent of our 9th grade class earned 6.5 credits, which would put them theoretically not credit deficient. So we were measuring failure rate, but we were also measuring, even if they did fail a class, they still could have earned, they might have failed one class, but earned 6.5 credits towards graduation. So we were looking at 2 different data points across the year. So at the end of the year, by the end of quarter 4, this is the final year grade. So how many kids passed all classes broken down by category for each grade level, meaning had 0 failures. So 9th grade, 82.6% of kids passed all their classes with no failures. But 96.6% earned 6.5 credits, which was well above what our TSI goal target was. Well above that target, which is that. So yeah, there were some failures there. Obviously, we'd like to see a number higher than 80%. Everybody would. But in light of the academic performance, we still were well up on our credit accrual goal for TSI, which is what we were targeting. 10th grade, it stayed pretty consistent for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter. We were at 81.7. We actually went up a little bit at the end of the year, like 0.09%. I know it's not much, but when you're measuring a total number of failures, you're looking at hundreds of grades. So considering that we went up a little bit, that's good to see. 11th grade finished right around 80, almost 81%. 12th grade was at 94.5%, which is a great number, especially because that's graduation. You want to make sure that you're building up to that high 90s, mid 90s percentage is ideal, because you want the majority of your students to walk across the stage on time. Excluding the special ed students who are back for a 5th year or extended years beyond that. But your 4-year cohort, you want your 12th grade, your classification of seniors to be in that mid 90 range. Then you look at the students with disabilities. So we finished 9th grade, 78.7 passed all their classes. That was up from 6% from the target where we were at for 3rd marking period. I know that we dropped a little bit, but then we climbed back up again towards the end of the year. 10th grade stayed honestly relatively consistent. We finished in the low 70s. 11th grade, we climbed significantly and hit 80%, which is great. And 12th grade, we climbed from 75% to 82.97%, and that was our other TSI goal. We had a goal identifying that all of our 12th grade students with disabilities, our goal was 80% would pass all of their scheduled classes, and we hit 82.97% that passed all their scheduled classes. So that was our target. So those were our 2 goals, which I can show those slides a little bit later. Then we had. I'm sorry?
No, that would be really helpful.
Yep, I'll show you
taking notes, but not going as fast as you're talking, so I appreciate that.
Sorry.
No, it's fine, thank you.
So I'll show you the TSI slides. They're next. Then we were measuring attendance data this year. That's definitely one of the areas. We have an attendance goal in our TSI plan for 2024-2025. We didn't last year. But we were looking at this data was really helpful for us to kind of get an idea of how to craft a goal for next year and what an accurate percentage would be. And one of the cool tools that we discovered via Linkit, thank you, Sarah, was that there's a dashboard, which Dr. Farina loves dashboards, that you can track live attendance data relative to your average attendance rate, your daily rate, how many kids are there. You can look at it identifies a group that's concerned or that is green and color code. It's really nice, really easy to monitor. But what we looked at throughout the year was we looked at per marking period what percent of students had 6 or more unexcused absences for each marking period, and then how many students had more than 18 unexcused absences. What percentage of that was in that last column? 18 or more, that's cumulative throughout the school year. So 4th quarter, 9th grade, 6.7%, dropped from 11.7, which is great. That means we had less students with unexcused absences there. 10th grade, 5.6%, down from 15% in third quarter, so we had less unexcused absences there. 15.89 for 3rd quarter in 11th grade, we were down to 6.27. I looked at the senior data a little bit differently, primarily because after they graduate, attendance data in Skyward is really fun to try to calculate, but once they roll over and they become graduates, attendance data becomes like really, really awesome to get out of Skyward. That's just a secondary note. But I wanted to look at the semester, like how many kids in the semester as a 12th grader were absent for more than 6 days unexcused. And you can see that number's big. 19.04% of our 12th graders had 6 or more unexcused absences from January 25th to June 7th. So our seniors tend to be, in my experience in a lot of districts, the ones who have a lot of absences, especially second semester, when they get to that mathematical standpoint of like, well, my grades are pretty good, so they call it the senior slide every year, senioritis. We all have heard that saying before the joking. So I wanted to kind of just look at that because it's really important for us to consider planning for our seniors and how can we entice them to be there more related to their attendance. Now, it doesn't necessarily impact their failures because their failure percentage, 94.5%, passed all their classes, but it does impact our attendance scores overall with the percent of unexcused absences. There were only 4% of our seniors, though, that had 18 or more absences that were unexcused this year. So in light of the fact that we had 6%, we had 6 or more, it was 19% for the semester, only 4% hit 18. So that's one of the lower numbers on the list. It is the lowest number. Then we looked at.
Are you guys able to drill down, like, the reasons why they are absent, other than senioritis?
Yeah,
By the way, I
well-
have senioritis too, but it's a whole different
Yeah.
thing.
It just depends on if they turn in notes or not. Like parents would have to turn in a doctor's note, or
That's why they're unexcused.
You know,
right?
A lot of times.
these are unexcused, meaning we have no notes. So there's no real, like, there's no rhyme or reason necessarily unless we get more information about a specific kid, like they, you know, if they're a truancy issue and we have a attendance improvement plan in place, then we know that there's an attendance issue, but a lot of them it's, did you just kick me out?
Yeah.
Maybe to the hardwire, Frank,
Yeah.
might be better.
But like, you don't have the time to, bring kids in and talk to them about like, what, what's going on.
Well, one of our intervention models is an attendance improvement plan, yes. So that's, when a kid hits a certain number of absences, they go through the SAFE process. Our counseling team pretty much facilitates a lot of those conversations as part of MTSS, but that's generally how we approach that. You tend to get, from my experiences, you tend to get a lot more 11th and 12th graders that are absent because they drive. The student drivers tend to have more of the attendance issues because buses always get there and they always get there on time.
Yeah.
The cars, they veer off and they end up at Dunkin' Donuts, and then the kids end up, coming in late, or, yeah, exactly.
But just to add to him, for our special ed students where those things happen, we ask all of our teachers K to 12,
Thank you, sir.
that's a IEP revision, right? So if there's a SAFE meeting, we know they may or may not be able to attend, but they do, from the
Yeah.
administrators,
Okay.
ask for the information, so then
Stop
the
sharing.
next revision, that's included under their functional performance because it's attendance.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Do you break it down by ethnicity, race?
Yep. Yeah, so you can look at that, you can look at the data based on either classification or subgroup performance. That's something that internally that we look at that based on, it depends on if you start to see trends. We look at our behavioral data like that too, our suspension data and things, based on race and, program. So special ed, non-special ed, 504, GIEP. Those are the different ways that I would look at this further. This isn't, I kind of mimicked what they were doing last year when I came in. So the way that they measured it was they looked at non-IEP and IEP. And so, coming through this year, the way that we just continue to break the data down, but internally we're breaking it down more by, different classifications.
So I might be looking too far into this, and you can tell me if I am, it's okay. I think there's obviously a trend between more excused absences and then, passing courses increases the more you have absences. Except for 9th grade students with disabilities, those numbers seem to, they kind of, I'll say wonky. Like,
So-
it doesn't add up. Was there a lot of changes with the population of the students with disabilities, like numbers jumping from, numbers of students in that category?
Do you mean because it dropped from 93 to 72 in quarter 3, or because the absences?
Do you mean the attendance?
So, yeah, so like from quarter 1 to quarter 2, for passing, it went from 85 to 93.
Yep.
But the absences went from 0 to almost 6.5%. And then even at the end, when you went from quarter 3 to quarter 4, the absences went up, but so did the passing courses went up.
Well, and I think the other thing to quantify with this data that I should be, if you look at the global data, so the attendance data for that are listed when it just says ninth grade, it's all 273 ninth graders. When we're talking about ninth graders with disabilities, there's 46 kids. So when we look at 14% of 46 is like 7 kids. So that's why your number looks so big. It's your 7 kids your 7 kids had 6 unexcused absences. Versus like the whole grade level where you're looking at your data 6%, well that's, 6% of 273 is 13 kids, like it's, or 14 kids or so. So it just depends on, I think the numbers they look bigger because the sample size is smaller, I think. That's part of it, but that's an interesting, observation though, considering that, my biggest thing that we need to look at as a team is that 93% in quarter 2 for ninth graders with disabilities and why we were there and we ended up down at 78.7%. Now, if you look at some of our final exam data and link it, the scores were low across the board for our final course exams for the year. And that's worth 10% of the grade. So that undoubtedly, because a lot of our students, a lot of students that wouldn't have been exempt from the final because their performance wasn't strong enough were taking that exam in June, and then we had our exam performance in most content areas was not great, which leaves me with a lot of questions for our staff this year as to like, how are we gonna work on that? Because that's gonna tank your passing percentage at the end of the year. If you have a kid who's right on the borderline and then takes an exam and doesn't do well, it's gonna bump them underneath that 60%.
Right.
So there's a lot of other pieces to it as well, but that's an interesting piece that we'll have to look at. I didn't necessarily analyze it directly. I didn't correlate the quarter 2 attendance with the end of the year. The quarter 2 progress with the end of the year attendance rate. We looked at it overall based on the number of kids that would have passed, or failed. 10th and 11th grade look good. I mean, 2.7%, 8.6%.
Right.
Low percentages with 18 or more. It's the ninth grade special ed students where
It just seems like an outlier.
it's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, there's different, we have a couple students though in that ninth grade class that were out a lot. If you know who I'm talking about, Carol.
Yeah, we definitely have a couple of students that,
Had a lot of absences. So there's that components too. There's some outliers that skew the data a little bit based on different scenarios, and it's all student need and student situations, family situations. So that's an outlier. I would agree. 12th grade, it stayed exactly the same between quarter 3 and quarter 4. And for special ed, and you had, semester. The semester 2 was the same data from quarter 3, so it maintained that 23% through the semester with how many kids had 6 or more unexcused. And we ended up with 12.76%, or 6 students essentially that had 18 or more.
similar situations.
Similar
Certain
situations.
students that,
Yeah, similar situation as ninth grade. So that's kind of our end. That's where we got to with the data. The data we're going to look at this year based on our goals is a little bit different. We are looking at, which we'll get into now, I guess. If there's any more questions about this, we can talk.
I just have a quick question.
Yep.
What did you do that helped quarter 4 in the attendance data? What did you do differently that made that so much better?
How many 12th graders did you call down?
It took a village,
I
to be
understand.
honest. There were students who the projection didn't look good. And we called them in, met with them after school, called them we took away their late arrival, early release, and said, if you can show an improvement, you can bring those grades up, you'll get it back. So we used incentives that were built in already. I think the conversation too, the having an MTSS coordinator who really caught those kids, I cannot stress enough the work that she did. But then there was the mental health component. So some of what you see here is you're getting these kids and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to address this. So naturally by internally addressing the mental health needs, we were able to see an improvement there
Okay.
as well.
If I can just also add, our district social worker, as well as Rodney, did a ton of home visits.
Ton of visits,
Okay.
yeah.
Some of those who are habitually truant, it was multiple visits within a week span to try and get them out of the
Squeaky
house
wheel gets the grease. I mean,
and
yeah.
to school.
That's
So,
how it works, right?
yeah,
And it still didn't always, many times it still didn't
Didn't
work.
help,
yeah.
And
Can we maintain that? Can we
Yep.
sustain that, I should say? Can we sustain that level?
Yeah, I think so. Another key thing I think that was really successful this year was, particularly with seniors, is we had senior at-risk plans. But as part of the MTSS process, we identified at-risk students across all grade levels. And as the year went on, and we were kind of working and fine-tuning our MTSS process, we were able to really kind of identify those kids and then look at what strategies were successful for them and then start to implement those across into other areas. So I think we learned a lot from the process last year and things that worked for us that we're going to continue to implement. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to continue with that process and improve it.
So
Yeah.
we don't have the MTSS coordinator though this year.
we have.
There
we
was
have
the
a
college and
part-
career, we were
part-time.
Frank was able to manipulate the schedule so she has some time, but that was a position
Yeah.
that was not included.
Yeah, so we were able to get some time out of the coordinator. What I will say is that, you know, based on how we saw improvements here, and you know, these guys with, you know, Megan Smolinski, who was serving in that role last year, Jen, Todd, when we got into like April, May, when I first jumped in, we had a whole group of at-risk group of kids that we were meeting about in MTSS, and we were able to quickly get them into IE interventions. We brought the seniors in during Keystones, and they did an intervention where they did credit recovery if they were behind. They were doing that during testing instead of just having the morning off during Keystones like they normally would have. We already have an at-risk list for 9, 10, and 11, 9 through 12 for next year. We already have kids assigned to our newly formed intervention centers for Keystone Performance and for different reasons. We'll be running IE interventions for, you know, remediation on Keystone grades. Also, the at-risk students will be running a senior credit deficient intervention and enrichment that will be running with students who are you know, graduation risks. So looking at this data and the improvement that we were able to see last year with the beginnings of MTSS, we kind of took that and were able to run with it and kind of launch the next layer where we're going to just hit the ground running, and kids are already going to be getting, you know, already be assigned and be put in areas that they can get some of the support that they need. So I think that because we saw that success, that's something that we're going to really try to target. And we've spread out the wealth now, so we have more teachers that are doing the work. So it's not all like at the actual interventions, but the data management and the data analysis and the quarterbacking of MTSS and stuff is going to fall on Megan with whatever time, you know, and our team and whatever time her schedule allows. I mean, ultimately, you know, as we continue to build this program out and we get bigger, that role is going to grow because we're seeing, you know, a higher need with mental health interventions and different supports, but we were able to get a really good start this year. So I think that that's partially a big reason why we saw a lot of improvement that we're going to try to continue next year. So
I think when you ask the question, is it sustainable? Yes, but it would benefit all kids. I think to have an MTSS coordinator to facilitate that at risks, you know, that was key. Like I think, missed kids, maybe before. And we're really identifying them sooner. I think there's still a lot of work to be had regarding the interventions that we do within a classroom. So I think that is really important. So we can do all this
You'll see
stuff,
that
right,
in
and
our
put all
goals.
these things in place, but if we don't really do the work within that 77 minutes, I think we're still going to be at a deficit.
And you'll see a lot, that's one of our goals. You'll see Tier 1 interventions is one of our goals for TSI, that we're going to try to monitor because of that need in the classroom. So these are our goals for last year. I kind of hit on these already, but I pulled this right out of FRCCP. Said it again, right? So our first goal was we wanted 80% of our students with disability to be passing all required courses for graduation. That would be our seniors. We hit 82.97%, so we satisfied the first goal for TSI last year. That was the goals that the team prior to me starting put together last summer. The second goal was that we wanted 90% of our 9th grade students, basically they would have to satisfy 6.5 credits. They would have to accrue 6.5 credits. The actual goal language is not up top, but that's what it says. But we had 96.6% earn 6.5 credits or more. That includes our IEP students in that data. So we satisfied both TSI targets based on the plan for last year. In order to build out this year's plan, these goals are very valuable. So what we did was, and you'll see momentarily, that we recrafted these goals and up the ante now to increase the performance that we're looking for. So I'll talk about that in a minute. If you guys remember back in May, we went over, I kind of outlined that we were looking for 4 to 5 targets this year coming up, related to special education course passing and progress, attendance. As you saw, we were monitoring attendance data, chapter 3 through 9 artifacts, which we did a really good job this year. We had 97.5% completion on chapter 3 through 9 artifacts, which is great, but that's definitely a goal that we want to monitor because the state evaluates us and evaluates that career readiness component, which is really important for our students, especially who are going to be moving into industry. And then a special education graduation rate goal, which we had last year. That was that passing all classes goal. But we also, because of the tier 1 piece, which Jen just mentioned, wanted to target a teaching and instructional goal. Those were what we talked about in May. So the goals that we put together for this coming year reflect that. So the first thing I wanted to share is the teacher input from our May meeting. I think is really important for I have a couple bullets here. I try to summarize it up based on what some of the teachers said. For special education students, which is a big part, a huge component of our TSI designation, the teacher suggested, additional things like resource rooms, study halls, intervention to support our special education population. Additional executive functioning support for students related to study skills and test prep and things like that. Paraprofessionals, I'm sharing out what our teachers shared, and we recently have hired a few, which is great. We're making progress on that. And or a testing room, looking at our consequences for students coming in late related to attendance and related to performance, which we actually did this summer. We looked at a formula for how we're going to discipline and hold students accountable for being late. That was one of our things we looked at for consequences. Chapter 339 obligations versus incentives, like how can we incentivize it and also potentially make it an obligation to what the teacher suggested were things like they can't buy their prom ticket if they haven't met their obligations of they have to fill this out, things like that. Grading clarity and discussions about weighting and grading in general, our grading practices were something that the teachers have asked for, doing a building grading committee, which we talked to our departments about at the end of the year, which I think we're going to be taking that project on this year to talk about grading and grading practices and consistency with grading, rubrics, common unit assessments that are being graded and evaluated with standards. That's definitely something that we have to push forward so we can look at performance across the standards and not just, how many questions did they get right or wrong? It should be really, did they understand the content? Were they successful in learning the content? Being clear with expectations for the staff on TSI, sharing the plan, discussing the plan, and acknowledging the hard work that staff did last year to satisfy our goals, which is that's on our opening of school faculty meeting slideshow. We're gonna acknowledge that. We're gonna talk about satisfying our goals. We're gonna talk about our expectations for this year that was planned out already. Holding high standards. They said, holding everybody to high standards and maintaining that. The students especially, keeping high standards for students. And they asked for providing resources for data and student achievement support. So this is some of the input that teachers kind of gave us in our conversation. We were successful, I think, in some of this to be able to put some of this in place. Obviously, some of it requires bigger conversations with staff. The grading conversation is huge. I think that's definitely something that we started to engage, and that's definitely something that's going to take some time to work through. We took a lot of this feedback very seriously and kind of, we looked at the way we were disciplining lates and how we were tracking lates this summer to make sure that we were going to be doing it consistently and being able to do it in a way that we can enforce it and that's progressive, as well as a way that we can track it better on our end. We talked a lot about Chapter 339, and obviously the addition of Angela is going to be able to help kind of expand and monitor some of that data permanently, Angela being added permanently. We're gonna review expectations and be clear about what we're gonna be, what teachers did that was really positive. We did add some additional special education support in our schedule, which we were able to do, not exactly all of that, but some pieces of it that we were able to staff for next year. So, this input was really, I thought, Jen and I what'd you think? I thought it was a really good conversation. I think that teachers are, based on the conversation, they're very excited, and I wouldn't say, how can I say this? They don't feel that the amount of work that we do, that the TSI designation is fairly showing how much effort is put in, I think is a really good way to say it. Like, there's a lot of really, really good work being done.
So they're really gonna kick ass
And-
so that we get there.
And I think if we're clear and we kind of lay out what our expectations are and that these are the goals and these are our target areas, the perspective I got from the staff was that they understand, like, that we got to rally, we have to work on it, but they also feel that it's important, and I agree as well that we do share and celebrate the successes and the level of work that's already been put through it, which I think is crucial, because there was a lot of work just put into satisfying the 2 goals from last year, and now we're talking about adding 3 additional goals and upping the ante on the 2 goals that we've currently been monitoring. So, if we're going to consistently maintain that high level of expectations, the goal is that, the collaborative piece of it and the growing pains that it's going to take potentially to navigate that throughout this year, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work by a lot of different people. So that, I think, is going to be something that I'm going to share with faculty when we meet, and I think that I want to acknowledge here that there was a lot of work put into last year to satisfy the goals, and I think that the staff is willing to put the effort into the goals for this year. I know that our team is, and I know that, our MTSS, I know Megan, who's going to be doing a lot of that work with us too, and Angela is ready to go to put work into it on those ends, but it's going to take an entire building of effort to be able to continue to push the performance ahead.
Do teachers feel like they have the supports they need, or do they feel like they need more support?
I think that there's a mix. I think that teachers probably feel that they could use more resources related to, a lot of the Tier 1 components. Probably a unified conversation around Tier 1 strategies. They probably feel that, everybody feels that we could use more time. I think that was a common conversation. I think a lot of educators, I know that everybody in education, we all feel like time is such a finite resource, and you gotta accomplish a lot with the time that you have. So I think, ways that we can try to prioritize teacher time is probably going to be important as well, if we're going to ask them to really focus on at-risk and focus on designing plans to support students. I think we need to also make sure that we balance that and give them enough time to do that, and be mindful of it. I think that if you ask any teacher, or you ask me, or you ask Jen or Todd, I don't want to speak for these guys that are right here, if you ask us if we need more stuff, we're going to say, yeah, we always need more stuff. The question is, I think our goal is to try to maximize what we have and really see what that is capable of, especially with the MTSS just getting going here. I think we still have a higher ceiling than what we've kind of gotten to so far. But I think they're always going to probably, more resources for data. They did ask about that. So ways that we can provide resources for, I guess, data analysis, data tracking, and time. There was a lot of conversation about time.
Andrea, how does PDE monitor us on this?
So for TSI, it's an internal monitoring. So what happens is, they'll evaluate, right? So in September, they're going to evaluate the data that exists to determine if we need another year of TSI. So once you're designated, you have to create a plan for the following year based on that previous data. It's internal until you hit 3 sequential years of needing TSI. So let's say we've already had 1 plan required. This will be our 2nd. If it comes out again, then it moves to ATSI, and then they come in and facilitate.
What's your
So-
confidence level as to whether or not that's gonna?
Well, I think that, we discussed internally, the things that tipped us over wasn't necessarily the growth and achievement portion, because I don't know if you remember way back when, there's cut scores. They start with growth and achievement. If you're below those cut scores in any subgroup, then they move you to step 2, which are the other federal indicators. Truthfully, what got us is something that honestly should never get us, the career benchmarks.
The 339 artifacts,
That.
which we are good, we got that.
Correct, so we have a high level of confidence that has absolved itself. The systems that were put in place, there was a ton of work done by the team internally, including Angela, to get those, and the counseling team, to get those artifacts together and in. I think we have to have a more coherent system, so we're not running around making sure we get those artifacts in.
We all agree on that, and that's that's a life goal right now.
So I think that those indicators will improve, so I have a high degree of confidence that we will not be on that list, not because our achievement is necessarily through the roof in, our growth and achievement, but because those other federal indicators, they've done a really nice job in shoring those up. So we don't, when we get to the second tier, if we do, that, correct.
Yeah.
And I think we were all really shocked and disappointed that it wasn't just growth and achievement, that it was those.
Honestly, my perspective on career benchmarks, it was so funny to hear that coming in, because that's like low-hanging fruit.
Correct.
That's how we talked about it, like, before I got here. That's like, the 339 artifacts is like, well, that's low-hanging fruit, like, just get them done. Like, so that's why we put that in as a goal for this TSI plan, like, to hit a certain percentage. But like last year, it's based on your 11th grade cohort. Like, that's how they classify the data. They pull that for your 11th graders. And I mean, Jen, we were at like 9? We had like only like 6 kids didn't do it out of like 280 kids.
Yeah, a
like,
mitigating circumstance.
yeah, they all had like a
Like,
special situation, but like we were so strong on our career benchmarks last year that when the classification comes out, we'll see. I mean, we'd still have to satisfy this plan that we put together. We'd still have to meet these goals, and we'd have to make sure that we maintain our push to get, to continue to improve. But that's not going to change. But like, our classification could change in September when we get redesignated. So that'll be interesting. But we kind of monitor, like, nobody comes in from the state to monitor our plan specifically, but they do check our plan to see if we satisfy our goals at the end.
Correct, we have to submit it, it has to be board approved. They're checking that all of that is done,
Yeah.
but they're not on site. I will say, that was the first year we have ever fallen below in those benchmarks, which is why we were really surprised. Usually that's something that, we have always fairly consistently been.
And that would have been the
able to
11th
do.
grade cohort in 2022,
Correct,
23, that would have pinged that.
so.
Yeah.
So Frank, can you tell me more about holding high standards, that comment? Because everything else on here is kind of more specific and measurable, like holding high standards. What does that mean?
It was a comment made by a staff member about, like, they want us to continue to hold the students to high standards, like high expectations, and not water down what we do just to get a number, if that makes sense. Like, if we're just trying to hit a target, don't water it down to hit the target. Continue to hold the high standards and get to the target by pushing the students, not make it easier for them necessarily.
Well, that's for themselves as well.
And,
They have
yeah.
to hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
and the same
For the
standard.
record, let's do that across the board,
Yeah.
everybody. Let's increase the rigor. Let's not tell kids they can't do math.
Yep.
We gotta get our foot off the brake here.
Yeah, and I think this was a really good conversation in May. I think it really helped kind of craft, when we talked about some of our instructional priorities and kind of built out that piece of the goal, one of the goals is based on that, and just classroom presence and analyzing data on certain components of instruction. That really kind of helped us with, how do we want to craft setting expectations, especially me starting as like my first full year as a principal. getting to hear from the staff and, getting to sit with these guys and just, what are they seeing in classrooms? I got into a good amount of classrooms at the end of the year to get a sense of what I was seeing. This conversation was really helpful in that, and then it gave everybody kind of the summer to kind of process it and just figure out, okay, let's look at our end of the year data and just kind of get a sense of what we should target. So how we came out of this was we put together 5 goals, and they're very much are reminiscent of what was shared in May. The first goal is, it stays exactly the same. It's the 9th grade passing all classes goal. Now that we have revised graduation requirements, it's six credits or more. 9th graders passing, they accrue 6 credits, but we went from 90%, which was our target last year, we've upped it to 95%. So we're gonna want 95% of our 9th graders to come out of the year earning at least 6 credits, which puts them so that they're not credit deficient. That is a huge predictor of success for the rest of the 3 years, is how you transition your 9th grade class in. That's why we have Link Crew and all the other transition components. That's why we have orientation Monday for freshmen. We have the parent evening. We're going to bring parents out. We're going to communicate credit expectations. It's a huge predictor of success. So we're going to maintain this goal, but we're going to up our level of what we're going to push. We hit 96.6% last year. I'm confident we can get to the 95, but we got a brand new group of kids that we don't know yet. So I think it's important that we maintain that high level, and that goes to the high level expectations that the staff was setting. Like, rather than maintaining the 90%, let's see if we can get to 95%. So that we maintain that goal. That's exactly the same. We put two goals together that are, I should say, one of them is similar to last year. This is the 12th grade passing all classes goal, but we added an attendance goal, a regular daily attendance goal, for our students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged students. So we expanded that goal to include economically disadvantaged because when we looked at the data on the wonderful dashboards in Linkit, the 2 subgroups that performed poorly on attendance, more so than any other group, are special ed students and economically disadvantaged students. So what we wanted to try to push towards, because at different points of the year attendance fluctuated wildly with certain groups of students, was that we would maintain an average, by the end of the year, we were maintaining an average daily attendance of 70% of students in these 2 groups combined were coming to school every day, on average, 70%. Because we've never measured a goal like this before, we set the baseline at 70%. I'm comfortable that we can get that goal based on some of the data we looked at. I wanted to go, these guys will say, I was like, let's go 80, and everybody's like, we've never really measured this goal, and there's a lot of special circumstances with this specific population of students. So we set the baseline at 70. If we do well, then obviously, even regardless of this TSI status, our goal would be then to up the ante for ourselves internally. Like, TSI is not going to our goals are not just going to go away, even if we don't have TSI after this year, but we're going to target trying to continue to push attendance higher.
And this is for 12th grade?
This is for all grades.
All grades.
We went all grades. That's also why we stuck at 70. So we're looking at every grade, special students with disabilities for 9th through 12th, and economically disadvantaged students for 9th through 12th, maintaining a 70% average daily attendance rate. Okay. Which I think that's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be one that I think is very valuable, because getting them to school is the only way we're going to get them to be successful in class. So we're going to try to target that one, and then the next goal was the 12th grade students that passing all classes that we had that goal last year. If you look over here in the far column, we were at 80% last year. We hit 82.97% and we met our goal. We upped the goal now to 85%. So we're going to push ourselves to try to get that extra 2%, where we have 85% or more of our 12th graders will pass, students with disabilities will pass every scheduled class. So we maintained those 2 goals. We added that goal, and then we added a goal related to career artifacts, and we specifically targeted our students with disabilities because that was the subgroup that needed the most attention. And our goal is that we want 90% or higher of our students with disabilities to complete their career benchmarks by that target, and that would be our all grade levels. So the career benchmarks are broken down over 4 years. There's different groupings that can be completed each year. So our goal is that 90% of students in all 4 grades with disabilities will complete all of their required benchmarks for that year. So that's going to continue to leave us on track to maintain that 339 requirement if we focus on all 4 grade levels versus just targeting, let's say, the 11th grade, because that's the data reporting cohort. That's all well and good, and that's like the Band-Aid to make sure that we would pass through, but our goal is to not have to look at it because it just becomes
So already done.
regular, organic, like we just do this. And so we're going to target all 4 grade levels to try to maintain that.
Can I comment to that?
Go ahead, Jen.
Maybe a question, maybe. So why aren't we meeting it? You know, what has been the challenge in getting that? And so when we looked at the data and extracted, we realized that students who attend the Western Center are not afforded the opportunity to take freshman prep. So they don't get that course, which is really their baseline of those standards, where they start. And so I'd like to work with the counseling team to come up with like a creative way to work with Western to maybe help facilitate that, so that we're not, because we don't see them, we split our time, so then we're crunch time, and so trying to find a creative way to work with them to help us, because it really benefits everyone.
Sure.
To do it.
And we're between 200 and 300 students now that are going to Western Center. So when you have, 25-30% of your population that's at Western Center, this is definitely something that we looked at, because if they come into 10th grade after not having freshman prep, they're already behind on what they need to have completed. And they're doing all the experiences that they need to do artifacts for, they're completing at Western Center. They're just not documenting it.
Right.
It's something that we talked about at length about a way to figure out how to, and we got to just work more closely with Western Center. And I know, knowing the team over there, our goal is and our hope is that they'll be receptive, because they're handling the experiences. They just have to catalog it in smart features, and we're going to try to work really closely to make that happen. And I think that again will just become a regular protocol. Like, that's how we move forward, and that should continue to kind of. We shouldn't have to talk about this problem, hopefully, ever. But that will create. If we do ever get into that second tier of evaluation because of growth or achievement, we'll know that we have a solid second tier that we really don't ever have to worry about, and especially considering that we slipped the 1 year for some reason, and that's what pinged us that year with that cohort. So that's why we thought it was important to put this in here, because there is work that needs to be done with the Western Center kids, with the freshmen, with kind of creating a syllabus almost, like a checklist per year of what time of year that each of these artifacts should be done, and where they should be done, and cataloging it, kind of breaking it down for teachers and students to kind of make it easier for them to accomplish it without it being such a burden where Jen and the counselors are calling them down and scrambling in 11th grade to do 7 artifacts that they couldn't get done because they're a Western Center kid and they just have never been able to do it. So we're trying to avoid that situation as much as possible.
Is it, and maybe this is for Jen and Todd, but is it communicated well to the kids about the whole artifact concept and how it works?
Yep.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
Every year, yeah.
Okay.
At grade level meetings, and then we also do it with, when they pick their intervention periods. We have a presentation that's good stuff.
I think you're gonna have a better chance of getting the Western Center to assist with the artifact piece than deal with, they've been trying, Todd, for how long you've been trying to work with them to adjust the schedule, find a little more time, do an odd and even, and get more time, because their schedules show that our kids have the least amount of time there of the 3 schools simply by distance. And therefore, our kids that are in those high hour programs, Cosmo and different programs, they fight tooth and nail to get as much time there. So I think we've all went through the cycle of trying to get additional things, and once it starts to impact on shop time, that's where you get pushback.
Maybe we need to
You know that, that's just the challenge there.
Maybe we need to send Keith over there in reconnaissance.
He's on there too.
Before we have one more goal, but before we get there, the last thing I want to share about Western Center is that, and I'll share it in this committee, is that they're the group of students that get the least amount of time in our intervention and enrichment period because of where it's scheduled. So one of our goals at the building level is to discuss a potential bell schedule change for 2025, 2026 that will allow us to put an intervention and enrichment period in place that gets them designated IE time where we can work with them on achievement. Now, there's other districts that do it. They've figured it out. They put it in the morning for half the days of the cycle and in the afternoon. So there's different ways we can put that 40 minutes. So I think it's definitely something that we have to start kind of playing with a little bit at the building level. And then, I'm hoping that you guys will be open to discussing it more as we get further along. We're ready to kind of talk about it, working with the central office team and the middle school, because they have a belt. There's a lot of factors to consider, but I think that might allow us more intervention support for that 200 to 300 kids, which is very lacking right now in our population. They're getting maybe 15, 20 minutes before they have to get on the bus or they're coming back. And you really can't get a solid intervention in with them, and that's going to impact achievement over they have the least amount of access to MTSS out of anybody in the building.
And that's the least amount of time there.
And the least amount of time in the shops.
Having said that, is it crazy to kind of flip the script a little bit? If they don't have access to the MTSS because they have to be there, are we able to put an MTSS person there?
I mean, I have no idea what that would look like.
I just don't
based on
know
what
if
they
that's
do.
even, something to consider putting.
I mean, they have the least amount of time in the shops already.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
to
I would
sacrifice
imagine it'll
time.
come down to.
Previous life, I've done that, a
Yeah.
part of that, and it was not well received because it was impacting shop time.
Okay.
And it was, it was literally math and literature remediation there, and it didn't work. I mean, it was,
Okay.
all efforts tried, it was.
I think if we maybe flipped where we had it in our schedule and we alternated it each day, we'll be able to capture the AM and PM tech, but we would have to modify just some times. And that's considering working with Western Center, whether or not, we have this AB model and a 6-day cycle, whether or not we look at simplifying it a little bit and just getting rid of AB and going to semesters and then doing a 6-day cycle. There's a lot of configurations that people have done, there's a lot of flex period, IE period configurations that districts have done. There's a lot of options. Souderton has an interesting one in the mornings, but that would impact our busing for AM, for people who go to AM
Theirs
tech.
does not impact busing.
Yeah,
They still drop off normal time, it's just the 0 period, correct?
Yeah, but
Don't reinvent the wheels.
I'm just saying
that could work.
Somebody that works.
well, what happens is the kids that can't drive, I guess they have to take the bus. So they're there regardless for that 0 or red period, whatever it is, so. So there's challenges everywhere. But the Western Center, right, if you've ever spent a day there, it's insane. It's like, okay, Springford, first lunch, come on down. 5 minutes later, it's like, okay, Upper Park, okay, back, okay, Pottsgrove,
Right.
these guys are leaving, okay, this one's, and you're, so that's a challenge. And they're willing to work. I think that timing is going to be an issue. Getting the artifacts should be, there's just ways to do it.
Yeah. So more to come on that, but that's definitely something we have to talk about, getting the Western Center students more support and making sure that we can provide intervention support for them.
So technical centers don't have any 339 artifact obligations? They don't have a 339?
So they are a partner in our Act 339
Okay.
plan.
That's kind of what
And
it is.
truthfully, the vocational school has lots of artifacts that students produce through their coursework. It's just the facilitation of getting it into.
They don't inventory
smart-
them.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that has been a significant challenge. And because we don't have time with them at homeschool, that adds to there's a lot of discussion around the students who attend the vocational school and some of the barriers. Frank alluded to some of them. Other conversations truthfully are, there was a time when I started here, 9th graders didn't go to the Western Center. And all of that has changed over 5 years along with our master schedule change.
There's also a
Those things
question at
all
the-
happen.
There's also a question at the Western Center, we can't figure out when it went to a 4-year program. Because it was a freshman exploratory,
Yeah.
2 or 3 shops, and then magically it went to a 4-year program. No one can figure it out. I mean, literally, we've labored over this.
Well, and our observation, truthfully, in looking at all this data, is we have a high number of students with disabilities 10 who have the highest academic needs, get the least amount of academic support at the homeschool, but those are skilled trades.
They need them.
That need academic skills. So it's this sort of puzzle, and that's why the master schedule conversation came up. We want them to go. We want them to be successful. but they need the academic intervention in order to be successful, and we can't give it to them right now
No.
by nature of the
Because they're not
schedule.
here.
So it's really a struggle. I mean, it's a discussion that merits a lot of time and effort because, you know, that is our challenge.
Yeah, 100%, and this year, we'd like to really engage in those conversations and maybe consider something for 24, 25, because as we continue to evolve our MTS, 25, 26, sorry, as we
I was like,
evolve
don't go
our,
backwards.
sorry, as we evolve our MTSS supports and we're able to offer more, we want to be able to have the Western Center students capitalize and take advantage of that. So, last goal, as we talked about quite a little bit ago, was about instruction. So we're gonna target classroom visitation and data tracking, which we have a detailed data tracking process now that's gonna monitor domains 2 and 3 of Danielson. And the areas that we're gonna focus on in our classroom presence are engagement, because one of the pieces of input that the students shared was that they felt that they were talked at, not allowed more voice and choice in the classroom. And I'm sharing that feedback with staff next week too. The student feedback, they're gonna hear what the students shared as well, because I think that that's valuable. But engagement is crucial, because if you create engaging lessons, it increases things like attendance, and it increases the student's desire to be in the room. We're gonna look at and focus on measuring data related to Tier 1 supports, and what those interventions look like in the classroom, which I know Jen alluded to, related to Tier 1, and what are we doing in the actual classroom before we submit a referral for MTSS and we're looking at Tier 2. We're going to also look at assessment, both formative and summative. Summative assessments need work related to standards alignment still. We have some work done, but there's a lot more work to be done there. Formative assessment is also crucial, related to our special education population, to understand if those students are getting what's being taught, and then if Tier 1 remediation is being provided or additional support is being provided with our case managers and or in an intervention center if possible. We're also going to be looking at use of data. Use of data in driving instruction. We're going to be looking at use of data in developing at-risk plans in classrooms. That's going to be one of the targets for staff during in-service week. We're going to provide them with an at-risk list for all 4 grades. They're going to have to look at their rosters and figure out a way to hit the ground running to support students who might be at risk for a variety of reasons. But our goal is we want to be in each classroom no less than 2 times per marking period. So there's approximately 65 instructional staff. So that between the 3 of us is 130 classroom visits per marking period of the school year. So that's roughly 500 classroom visits for the year. Now that includes formal observations and also instructional rounds, walkthrough drop-ins. And so, we've balanced out our supervision. So we have a balanced level, a balanced load of who's supervising which departments. And the addition of the special education supervisor is going to allow for more oversight with our special education department, which is important because of the TSI designations, as well as the additional supports needed with that department. But our goal as a team is really to be visible in classrooms. We thought that coming through with an instructional goal is really key on TSI, because if you're not really targeting and collecting data on your instructional model, you struggle with being able to articulate what your professional development needs are if you're not looking at global data across the building. What your strengths are, like what are we doing really, really well? What can our teachers lead professional development in? Because some teachers can lead sessions in some of the strategies that they're doing that are really, really good. As well as, where are the holes that we see with instruction? The data model that we're going to be using, it's a simple form, but it gives immediate feedback to the teachers, and it allows us to quantify the entire year's worth of instructional data. And really what we're seeing, it's based on what you see. We're going to be quantifying what we see. But that kind of rounds out our goals.
Questions?
Yep.
Do we have a forum for walkthroughs?
Yeah.
Okay.
I adapted kind of theirs into a little bit more detail for us, but yes.
So is the feedback immediate?
Yep.
Or- okay. Would you consider somewhere down the road, not this year, but at some point, peer supervision?
Yep.
That's what some people call it,
Peer coaching, yep.
Peer coaching, whatever you want to call it. How do you perceive handling the difficult, struggling, I'm not changing teacher.
We don't have any of those, do we?
Yeah,
So-
some teachers,
Sort of like an
some
improvement
teachers don't know how to modify. Some teachers, like, when I was teaching, I learned the most through peer supervision, through mentoring.
It's like a fresh
It
idea.
just, yeah, I mean, just teaching with fellow teachers and getting ideas of technique and style and all of that. Because I think some teachers who struggle, i.e., in other words, that are digging in and not going to change, just don't know what to do.
That's why
So-
they dug in, right?
Yes.
So once we get a chance of looking at the data and kind of seeing what we have, and, inevitably, there's some folks that are going to stand out both ways, I think, our goal is not necessarily to use it punitively. The goal is to have it be a conversational starter. And the differentiated supervision model, I think, is really valuable. And I've seen a lot of different things. Like, you can do things called like tuning protocols, where you look at student work and you analyze grading practices, and it puts a group of teachers together, and it's, there's a lot of things you can do with it, and I think that we have a lot of possibilities there. You can have, a lot of times teachers will pick a peer to do peer coaching with, but you can also, if you decide to assign peers, you can do that, where you pair certain teachers together as an administrative team, which I've seen that done before. Right now, we don't really have a coach in the building at the high school level. We have pieces of that, sort of as a remnant with Megan here, but Megan's got a lot of responsibility now, so between teaching partially and also MTSS, so depending on our instructional data, that could be a conversation where we talk about, a dedicated coach or something like that. But until we really get some really solid, like, they did some walkthroughs last year, the team, before, but they did a good amount of walkthroughs last year, but until we really prioritize this and take a good look at it this year, I don't want to put the cart before the horse and hope that, I'm hoping that our staff is receptive to the feedback. As soon as we hit send on this, they get the feedback, it goes right to them.
Yeah, and even having conversations with teachers after you do a walkthrough and just
Yep.
say, hey, did you ever consider, a lot are, receptive to that too, and just,
It's a conversation.
So what-
and the more you guys know, the more you do it, the more comfortable teachers are going to become and understand that it's not punitive, and you can start those collaborative conversations and improve.
And I would also say, we've had TLS cohorts. This is our last TLS cohort coming in, and there is a coach through TLS for the teachers. And so I think a piece of this is also how are we embracing that investment in professional development and coaching. I think that we could really utilize those coaches a little more. And now that all staff in the building will have gone through that after this year, it's really sort of what are those look-fors, what are those best practices, are we seeing them, day in and day out. As it relates to peer coaching, that's going to have to be a conversation in our supervision and observation plan. That currently is not, part of that model. So, coaching is, but as a supervision option, it is not.
And we did meet with TLS and kind of discussed our targets for instruction with them, so we're all on the same page. So as they work with our teachers, because they have allotted time that's dedicated to coach our teachers this year, and it's based on teacher sign up, which is great. So now, and they've shared that, like, there are a good amount of teachers that take advantage of it, and they'll meet with them on a various amount of topics, but we've communicated to TLS that these are our targets that we're looking for and we're trying to measure data on, so that way TLS can be on the same page, that team can be on the same page as us, as when we are going in and we're measuring and we're looking, and ideally it's collecting data. Like, really, these walkthrough, these classroom visits on our end are really collecting data. It's getting a view of our instructional status, I should say, as a building. There's a lot of great things going on. I'm not anticipating we're going to find like terrible instruction. I'm anticipating that we're going to find some really great instruction. But inevitably, you find areas that professional development can be catered towards to help support growth, and whenever you do a real hard look at instruction. So that's kind of that's why we're measuring it, because it's valuable and it's gonna drive everything else. It drives, it drives achievement, it drives attendance, it drives, it's connected to everything, because our teachers are the ones that are putting anything we want to put in place, that's all getting delivered by our teachers. So ways that we can figure out how to support them and engage in conversations of growth that are safe conversations, not conversations that are about, hey, I was in your class. Like, it doesn't need to be that way. It can be like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or tell me what you were thinking when you were doing that, Those are kind of the coaching conversations versus the, what are you doing conversations.
And then you don't want to go there.
No, the goal is to engage in a healthy set of dialogue over instruction. And I think that measuring this goal and targeting visits will help us kind of get some really good data.
We did give that feedback last year.
Yeah.
That it just looked different. So it was in an email, it was a let's talk, it was it just wasn't a Spitfire Google form, but those conversations did take place. And I think what we've learned, I'm gonna speak for Todd, is people want feedback.
Yeah.
They're not opposed to it. And even when you model it in a way that's just questioning, like, hey, I noticed, have you ever thought of, I can say we did a lot of that this year, because it was a goal. The walkthrough was a goal, and people are open to it.
Yeah, and I would say, like, with walkthroughs and things that I did, like, if I didn't have a conversation with the teacher shortly thereafter, like, I would try to send an email, like, oftentimes before I would leave the classroom, of questions and things that I saw.
Yeah.
And I would say that my response time from teachers on that email was very quick, and that, like, they were answering things, and we had some back and forth through that. So I think that they were very receptive of the feedback and that dialogue. And the same things happen in, formal observation, post-observation, where you're talking about those things and you're going through different strategies.
Yeah. And it's got to be really good from a student point of view when they see you guys in the classroom and your presence.
And I think that all goes to, I keep going back in my head to one of the survey responses that was so low last year from the students around, they didn't understand why they needed to be
There.
And I think both, all of these things are an attempt to really, and will hopefully improve that metric, because that was a very depressing, sobering metric to see that they didn't understand why am I even here? What does this have to do with me? Why does this apply? So yeah, I think changing instruction to make that more apparent for the students is paramount there.
And in my experience, I haven't been here that long, but we have a really, really great staff and really dedicated teachers that are really passionate about what they do, and they want to do well, they want us to do well, they want the kids to do well. I anticipate the conversations are going to be really great. I'm excited to have a lot of them, because the instructional piece is like my favorite thing of what we do, because we get to be in classrooms, we get to see the kids. It's all about, that's what we're here for. We're not, like, all this other stuff that we're doing, that's great, but like, we're really here to, it's about what's happening in classrooms. So I'm excited about, I think that, it's ambitious for us to do this. This is a lot. This is going to be ambitious, but it's really important, and it's going to, get us to be, for ourselves, it's a really good growth area for us to target instructions for us as a team, like to really engage in a way that we approach it, and getting consistent on how we're talking about it, because we're a new team, obviously with me coming in, and so it's great all around. It's just it's a good goal to measure. It's really good to prioritize it. It'll help us really kind of compare that to some of the achievement components, and also be able to see some of the assessment things as we're starting to work on grading and engaging in those conversations and talking about a bell schedule, and that'll really help with all that time in classrooms for us to be able to really talk more in depth, I think, than if we were, just looking at it from a surface level too. So those are our 5 goals. The next steps out of here, just like last year, it's quarterly monitoring, that we're going to be pulling data reports to run and do that. My thought is that, I don't think that there's an EPS in January, but I think there is one in February. But my thought is that we do a report out at the middle of the year, maybe, like on where we are.
Just timing-wise, there isn't one?
Should be one in January.
Or maybe there's one in January, sorry.
Maybe December.
But you won't have your data.
I won't have my mid-year data until the end of January.
Oh, I see.
So we're thinking maybe like February's EPS would be a good report out mid-year on where we are with goal progress. Obviously, if we need to report anything before that, we could. But, you know, that gives us 2 marking periods worth of tracking to see like how much progress we can get to. And we're awaiting the September reclassification to kind of see what that looks like. But our next level of layer here for us, and we're confident, we're hoping here, but our next layer is that we're gonna lay out this plan, all the goals that we shared tonight, we're gonna communicate those with the staff, lay out the expectations, and talk about last year's data and make sure that everybody understands what we're gonna be looking for and what we'll be prioritizing this year. Because either way, regardless of September, we have to finish this plan, it doesn't matter. So we're gonna, and it's good, everything we have measurements for is good practice. It's just good practice to look at. So that's our next steps, that's our plan.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I feel much more confident going into this year than I did in the beginning of last year as far as understanding the data and, you know, feeling confident that you guys really do have a handle on it. And that's not to say that I don't want to dismiss the amount of work that went in last year as well. I mean, I think the amount of work that you guys did as well as the teachers and the paras and the MTSS coordinators, you know, is remarkable and you know, I really appreciate it. I'm okay with, and JP, tell me, I mean, so this means for the September meeting, we're not really going to have a whole lot to share because it'll be new.
Yeah.
October is the meeting where we go through all the survey responses, right?
Well, and per the request from last year when I split elementary and middle school into
Yes.
separate meetings.
Yes.
So we're bringing each building, one in the end of September, one in October.
I love that idea, actually.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
great.
just to give time.
And I guess my point is, I'm saying,
We're not gonna have an update until
and I'm okay with that.
Yes.
But because
If
I'm
there's
confident
something-
in the plan that has been,
glaringly wrong. or-
Yeah.
Glaringly
Wrong.
Yeah, we won't have any.
No news we'll consider good news.
good,
Yeah,
yeah.
we won't have any marking period data until November, when marking period 1 ends, is when we'll get quarter 1. Quarter 2 is like late January, so we won't have anything till then. What we may engage in we may want, and I'll talk to Dr. Farina and, you know, and see where we are and Dr. Roche, but we may want to start engaging in more conversations about the bell schedule prior to January, but that could be, it won't be in the beginning, in the first 2 meetings, but I'd like to start bringing that topic up with our department chairs and with our staff and getting some input from the
Yeah, because
staff.
February, you've already got things really, you're laying groundwork for the following year.
Yeah, so our thought is by that point, if we are going to make a change, we will, or we're going to modify it in any way, we're going to want to probably engage in those conversations maybe like December. We're going to start by the end of this calendar year, we're going to want to probably start to be kind of well on our way with what do we want this to look like, how do we think it's going to work, any, you know, impacts from, you know, scheduling, transportation, budget, like any type of impact it might make when you make a bell schedule change to Western Center. But that might be something we want to talk about in EPS outside of just the TSI component, just because that may be something that comes up.
I like it.
Yep.
Anything else, JP?
I would say just nice job on the presentation and
Yeah.
laying everything out. I
So is this
understand.
on the workshop for approval?
It will be. Well, if you
Didn't sign it.
have a
We
motion
did
and move it
officially.
forward, it does have to be approved. So, you know, the plan,
So I'll look for a motion to move this plan to the board workshop for approval by the board.
Motion.
Second,
Any discussions or questions?
enthusiastic second.
Yes.
Enthusiastic second.
And real
All
quick,
those-
I see,
sorry.
Andrew, on the draft, there's also next Thursday's meeting. Is there a presentation? Is the plan to do another presentation, just not an hour and 10 minutes?
correct, I thought it would just be a, you know, a statement about the plan.
And I was, I
Yeah.
mean, I
You're
took
gonna have to update it.
copious
You'll have
notes
your
to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
potentially to be able to provide.
Yeah,
info.
and you'll do that first, and so.
Yeah.
Well, can I push back? Oh, I will anyway.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, you're
Push away.
We work for you.
I personally don't want to be concerned with, is my presentation too long? This is what we do. And this stuff's really important. So if Frank needs, you know, half hour, 45 minutes, then Frank gets a half hour, 45 minutes. That's just me.
I was joking, Peg.
Yeah.
I wasn't, I appreciate it.
I don't think you.
I mean, I
You
can,
just want more time for your report.
Yeah.
I can just do the 5
I
goals.
don't have a report.
Well-
I'm happy to give up my future report.
For anything.
That much
You're
report.
conceding,
Yeah.
no piggybacking. I did put it on there because I thought.
It's fine, I just wanted to clarify that it's
Yeah.
on
Ask
there.
if you need
That's
So
fine.
we're gonna have a presentation by the high school
For-
administration.
To whatever
Deeper down.
level, yeah. I'm not sure we need to go to this level of detail, I think that's why we're here.
Right.
Just go over the 5 goals.
Correct, that's, I mean,
Last year's
that's,
goals, results, and then.
Yeah, last year we satisfied our goals.
And teacher feedback. I think the teacher feedback's kind of important.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think. I mean.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to show that you have that engagement, I think is important.
Mhm. And it'll be interesting to see how, if you can remark too next week on how they received all of this. Once you review it with them.
yeah, because we're going to review the whole plan and the feedback and input from the students and everything on Wednesday. So it'll be ahead of this meeting, it'll be ahead of the meeting next week. So yeah, okay.
Okay. So, we had the motion, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move this forward and talk about it next week then.
Okay.
Thank you again very much.
Thank you.
All right, final, I'm assuming this is a quick update?
It is a very quick update.
No, that's fine, I just didn't, yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just have more to come every month probably on
Great.
this. So this is the once every 6 years, the last time, compliance monitoring. I'll probably use the acronym CMCI, which is Compliance Monitoring for Continual Improvement for Special Education. So the actual visitation, on-site, virtual are these dates. So it started. It has started now. There's a great deal of pre-work that has to be done and submitted to the Bureau Advisor. I have a meeting with her on Monday morning, already starting and sharing some of the information. It's going to be going out. There are survey requirements. We're hoping to have those done within a couple of weeks for all of our teachers, K-12. Gen Ed and Special Ed need to complete the survey. Any students 14 and older that are special education, they're offered the survey as well. And then all of our parents of special education students, K-12, will be provided with a survey as well. So we have, I believe it's from today, I have been told, it's 45 days we have to get those surveys in. We'll know what the completion rate is, we'll be on top of that. And so the goal of that is to get some results and then obviously some next steps if things come out of that. But they are part of the requirements. On the 12th is the virtual administrative interview with the Bureau Advisor. A lot of that will be what's all going to be due to her. End of September, early October. There are a lot of sections, 23 sections, so there'll be a lot of teamwork here from our district admin that will help to provide some of the information, PIMS coordinator as well. And then on 11/13 and 11/14, that is when they will physically be here. So the Bureau Advisor will be here, and then they have peer monitors that will be here. There will likely be 3 of them. They will be, there'll be 10 student files. They will on-site review all of their special education paperwork. That will also include going to the building. So if we have, and it typically tends to be close to 4 out of the 10 are high school students because of that transition piece, there will be interviews with the special education case manager, interviews with a gen ed teacher that works with that student. There'll be parent interviews through phone calls. And student observations. That will be for every one of those 10 students that will occur on those 2 days. So there's a lot of pieces to it. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a brief update.
And I
on it.
appreciate it, and then when can we expect like a report out from that?
So I believe I saw, so this is, the 14th is over. I think they have 45 to 60 days to then come back to us with the report on any needs or you know, where we stand and any next steps moving forward.
Okay.
So February-ish.
Well, I'll be back here, same group.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
Anything on that, JP? You good with that?
I'm good with that.
Anybody else? Questions, thoughts, comments?
Keep up the good work.
What's that?
Keep up the good work.
Keep up the good work, yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
really excited.
Okay, well, having said that, if there is no other new business, anything from the public? Oh, public, anything?
I'm the public.
Here you are,
So
tonight.
This is great information to have. Helps me to kind of see where we're moving towards, so.
Very positive, I
Yeah,
agree.
very
Thank you
positive.
very much. All right, well then, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
Fantastic, any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, guys, thank you very much.
I just heard like, I just heard about your
Yeah.
theater.
Yeah.